In this video, we're going to contemplate what it's like to consider the economics of a restructure, not so much the legal or HR point of view, but just the economics and how you go about anticipating what will happen as you try to do a restructure. Restructuring a company normally follows a regular path. It doesn't really matter on the size, but it normally also follows a necessity. So restructuring can occur for two reasons. One is you're downsizing the company from an economic point of view. The other is the company has a lot of opportunity and you're trying to upsize quickly, but you want to model what those changes will be. The majority of this video will be looking at how to restructure for downsizing purposes. Before we get started, I'd like to clarify a few things. So I'll interplay the words redundancy and early termination quite a bit, but in real terms, redundancy is what you pay people as an extra if you do an early termination, whereas early termination is the correct term for saying that you're going to terminate a position and pay the people out whatever their entitlements are. So keep in mind that early termination is the first part, and redundancy calculations may apply if it's in their contract as well. If you're new to Labour Rate, here's a word of advice. If you're slightly confused when using one of these widgets, you can refer to these videos up here. So I'll go back. You can see there's a video here. You can push play, and down the bottom you can see these individual sound bites that relate to the box you're looking at, the widget. See, that's the E one, and you can get a definition by just pushing on that play button and listening to the audio recording. So Labour Rate has a series of very important reports, and when you go into these different reports you find these boxes and widgets. Now here's a significant feature that you will need for considering the economics of restructuring a company. It's the ability to duplicate that company. So at the moment I'm in the headline reports, and what you can see here is I've actually created two companies, the original company and a duplicate company. Now, I did that by going to company here, finding my particular company I want to copy, ticking it here, and up here you'll see this duplicate. So when I duplicate a company, I can choose whether I do just the company or the company and the staff. And of course, if I'm restructuring a company, I do want to do both. So now you can see here that I've duplicated a company. So over the left here, you can see the original company, Cantilever. And on the right here, I've copied it, and you can see the duplicate sitting here. So of course you could have more than one. So you might choose to do 3 phases of changes, and you can have them all laid out down here and choose which one you want to filter on at any point in time. Another feature is that I can also duplicate staff, which means I can take my staff in here, this model, and I can duplicate them and put them in and out of that model. So what we have over here is a duplicate of those people here, but I've already removed some of the staff because I'm restructuring the company, and you can see this here, and these figures have changed in these boxes. So to duplicate the staff, we just go to the staff tab, and you can see down here I've got this Adrian. I would just tick him here, and I've got duplicate function there. So it's as simple as that. If I delete Adrian from my model, my second one, then I just add him back in again to that model, and I can move staff in and out at my leisure until I have the model that I want to see. So let's now contemplate my before and after model. So we'll start by focusing on the before model here. And if you just forget all those other gauges, think of it like driving a car. You just look at one gauge at a time. And we'll concentrate on this K widget down here, bring it into focus. So what you can see here is the contract hourly rates of each of my staff. So this is the contracted hourly rate sitting here. But of course what happens is there's additions, like so much for KiwiSaver, ACC, adding on a bit for their holiday entitlements during the year, stat holidays, sick and sad leave, maternity leave, and so on, right through to recruitment figures here if I'm already paying those. And that has assigned those to an hourly rate, so you can see what the truer hourly rate is over here of each of these individuals. One of the big mistakes people make is thinking that each of these figures along here is static. In other words, it's the same all year round, but it's not. This varies quite a bit, and it's dependent on a number of things, including entitlement leave and inefficiencies. To demonstrate this point and how these figures go up and down, I'm just going to show you this graphic here so you understand this point. I've got John here, say I'm 40 hours a week at 52 weeks a year, so theoretically he's contracted to do 2,080 hours. But of course he's going to have holidays, he's going to have could have maternity leave, jury service, anything like that. So he is not going to work that total amount of hours, but I'm going to pay him for that, and I'm going to pay him at $30 an hour. So that is essentially $62,000 per year, and the 3% KiwiSaver I have to add on to that, this is just one entitlement, keep in mind, is $1,872. So if John doesn't work the full 2,080 hours because he has his holidays and whatever, and stat holidays, then as the time goes down, see the dollars goes up. So that means the per dollar per contribution per hour for that entitlement goes up the less and less time that John works, to the point where if he worked half a year for whatever reason, could be long service leave, then what we end up with is his effective KiwiSaver hourly rate is double per effective hour he's actually at work. So I'll go back now to our report. So these figures across here are not static, is what I'm really pointing out, and at any given point in time you need to understand them in context that the minimum hourly rate per hour worked when they're physically at work changes periodically, and you need to keep on top of that to know what your true hourly rates are. Let's look at some of the benefits of a before and after effect of modelling your business through labour rate. So remember, we've got the before company over here, and we've laid some staff off, and we've got the after company sitting over here. At first glance, I can immediately see that the base hourly rate here was $1,170 per hour. That assumes everyone is at work. And over here, I can see that the new model shows $786 an hour. Also, the minimum hourly rate, or the realistic hourly rate, has changed from $1,517 to $1,033. That shows me that we've nearly taken our salary bill down by a third. I could duplicate the new model here again and make some other changes, maybe lay off even more people to see what the comparative model will be. But if I look across the page now at the other figures, and let's start with this one here, what I can see here is that I already had an accrued leave liability of $160,000. That means my staff were already owed $160,000. That's $160,000 sitting in my bank account that actually belongs to the staff. Over here, I'll see that that figure has now dropped down to $120,000. Immediately that tells me that there is a $40,000 difference, which means early entitlement payout is going to be about $40,000. The new accruing leave here is $130,000, down $55,000 from the $185,000, and that means over the following year, that means that I've lowered my overall liability for accrued leave down to $250,000 from $346,000. While we're here, let's consider some of the other before and afters. If I look at the F widget here, I can see that my original salaries were around $2.5 million, but on the new model it's going to be at about $1.69 million. I can also see that my non-billable or administrative staff was sitting at around about $450,000, whereas my new company has them at around $329,000. Up here I can see that my hours paid per year was 68,000, and by removing those staff I'm down to 48,000 hours paid a year. Now the hours paid where they are not at work due to entitlements was 8,500. Now we're down to 6,030. And the total lost wages due to those hours entitlement has moved from $498,000 down to $368,000. Of particular interest to me is this one here, lost revenue due to inefficient work. Inefficient work is where staff are at work but not doing productive things, whereas over here if we look at the loss, that's entitlement, so we can do something about that, but those losses are generally written into legislation or their contracts. So if we go back to this loss here, the inefficient loss, it's $843,000. I can also see over here I've lowered that down to $574. But as a ratio, I think you'll find that this $574,000 is actually higher. I've actually built in some inefficiency in duplicating and changing this model. Let's now move on to the key metrics report. So what I want to first point out, because it jumps out to me, down here is the cost of attributing the overhead staff. So what happens is you have the minimum realistic hourly rate here, but if you wanted to attribute the cost of the overhead staff to the productive staff, then you'd have to come up with an hourly rate calculation. Well, you can see that here. So here I have Manfred at $44 an hour. That's his realistic hourly rate, and I'd have to add $8.38 an hour to that to cover the cost of my administrative staff and overheads, which would make a total hourly rate of $52.85. But another important thing you can see here too is that see these base redundancy costs, so you can see a before and after here. But what I'm going to do is just increase the size of this so you can see this easier. If Adrian and Barry had the same job description, so essentially they did the same role, but I wanted to compare the cost of actually laying off Adrian to laying off Barry for early termination purposes. If I hover on here, you can see that Adrian will cost me $25,000 to terminate early right now, whereas if Barry's in the equivalent role, he will cost me $6,900. So what I can do is go along and compare each of my staff to make some decisions about who I'm more likely to want to lay off for an economic reason as opposed to an HR, legal or an emotional reason. Here we have the availability report. Now this is going to help me compare the before and the after with my two models, the amount of time that people are available to actually do productive work, and this is important. So I only want you to look at a few boxes here. The others, yes, they show information, but they're not important from a restructure point of view. The first one is this, the A box here. So you can see in my current company I'm paying for 81,000 hours of time, and in my new company I'm paying for 56,000. So there's obviously a cost saving in that. But more importantly, what I've got here is that 65,000 hours are available for productive work, but down here I'm at 44,000 hours. Now I just happen to know that what I've done is remove 20% of my staff, but that's a 24 closing in on 25% reduction in my billable hours. So that could have a big impact on revenue from the current selection. If I want to know who's going to be available after a round of early terminations, and how that availability is going to affect my production hours availability, I can look in here and compare it to the overall hours available over here. But what's important to note is that the cost of terminating people relates to how much accrued leave they've got on top of other things. So if I choose to pay out the accrued leave now on the first round of termination, then my cost of doing these early round of termination is going to be higher. If I choose to do it later, yes, I lower the cost of those terminations, but what happens is I've only deferred that cost. It's not a long-term solution, but it is a stopgap solution that may be critical given your current cash position. While we're on availability, I just want to mention something else that's important. So you can see that people get holiday leave, typically 4 weeks a year, so you can see the hours there for the 4 weeks, and then of course they get public holidays as well. So those become part of their entitlements. When they don't use that leave for a while, it adds up, it gets accrued. And here's the hours here that are currently owing. So there is 4,700 hours of staff leave that is currently available to them that we have to pay for. So they take the time off and we're going to have to pay for that leave. Given that you're looking to restructure your company for financial reasons, you need to be very aware of this amount of leave that is still remaining, because that's time that your staff will not be available to produce you money or revenue. On top of that, employers don't usually realise that when their staff are having leave, they're accruing the next lot of leave as well. So that's just reducing the productive time for the following year. Now I want to compare the inefficiency reports. Unlike entitlements where staff are not at work and still getting paid, inefficiency means that they are actually at work but not doing work that is productive. So on the right hand side here, I've opened up headline figures again. So what you can see here is that we are paying for 48,000 hours of work. Over here we can see that we have 9,100 hours that are inefficiently worked. Keep in mind these inefficiency numbers do not relate to entitlements. These are just purely in-house inefficiencies. So that 9,000 hours that are lost due to inefficiency would translate through to $843,000 of revenue if you could recoup it. And this should become a point or a target for the company to address, either before or after, it makes no difference. The breakdown of those figures can be seen in this table here, or the worst offenders can immediately be seen in each of these categories around the outside. And if you want to know the worst offenders by role as opposed to personnel, then you can use box K here to figure that one out. Here is another issue that I wish to point out while I'm here. See down the bottom here we have the quoting for free hours totaled. That's 2,874 hours of free quoting time. That's an awful lot. And if you translated that through to the possibility of revenue, or what it actually costs in wages, then either way it's a lot of money and it's a lot of loss. And as an advisor, you should look at this and go, can we do this better? So software would typically make it quicker, or you could outsource that as an option, or charge for quoting. Now I've moved on to compare the losses reports between my before and after organisation. Straight away we've brought through the time losses due to inefficiency, which you can see in box A here and box A here, and we can see the difference. We were losing 9,151 hours before, and now we're losing 6,472. If we go down to box B, then we can have a look at the hours lost due to entitlements, not inefficiencies. And we can see that that's moved down from 16,490 hours down to 12,274. The patchwork box on the left here is actually a quick spotter for all the figures on the right. For the want of a better term, the worst offenders are highlighted in the biggest blocks, and the same down here. Of great importance should be these two figures: lost revenue due to entitlements. So you can see here it's $338,000, and we can see here due to inefficiencies we have $843,000 lost. So we're talking close to $1.2 million of total losses, which could be a target to address. And over here, once we've reduced our staff by 20%, we can see that this has also come down proportionally with it. Box D and E down here are similar to box C and D in that the patchwork on the right shows the worst offenders, but the detail is on the left here, so you can actually scroll up and down and see which people have got the greatest inefficiency loss and therefore the lost revenue. So this helps you to analyse at a deeper level, or certainly at an individual level, where you might want to address some of the issues. One of the beauties of being able to model your company for the future and to actually see what would happen if you make these changes is if there are any misfits, as in percentage changes, then you should be able to see those reasonably quick. So one of those is the one I've seen here, is the true potential revenue. So you can see here it's 3.3 million before I changed the company, so that's potential. But over here we've dropped down to 2,098,000, so that's a greater than 30% drop when we've only reduced our staff by 20%. So our potential revenue has dropped disproportionate to the amount of staff that we're actually laying off. This presents you with a problem because in theory, if you carried the slimmest amount of staff and totally maximise their productivity, you're still likely to have a profit level that is 30% down. To stem the losses, we need more productive time. So what I've done now is gone to the before and the after in production reports. If you look at Widget A, we can see the potential monthly billable staff revenue. So that's how much revenue per staff member we're likely to get. This also takes into account the amount of time the staff will have off. So you can see here where most of my money is going to be made. So the annual potential revenue can also be seen here with my best performing people immediately in the bigger blocks and my less performing people in here. Now that I've made my selection of which staff I'm going to move out in my first model, I can see over here the change. So I can compare it to over here. And also what I can do is see in the patchworks if in the lines there are any key differences. Moving down to here, we can see the potential labour-based revenue for the old company was there. But the most profitable staff per hour comparison, or in other words, the margin as a percentage, can be seen in these figures. So I can see my gross margin as a percentage is 19% for Handy, and it's 17% for Vince, and so on. But over here I had figures for 31% for Basil and 26% for Dave. So you may find that the selection you're making of your staff will impact on your overall gross margin. You should be aware that sometimes your gross margins decrease depending on the people you select, and you want to see what that translates through into real revenue and real efficiency. Now what we're going to do is move on to compare the before and after revenue. So if we look at the revenue report here, I'll expand it for you. What we can see here is the desired charge out rates down below. And let me explain this. The CE hourly rate is the contracted rate plus the entitlements included. What we know is that Brian had a contracted rate of $28 an hour, but by the time we added in his entitlements, it's $37.82. If you go back and look at an earlier part of the recording, you'll see how this is explained. So if Brian is really costing you $37.82 an hour and you want to make a 100% margin on him, then of course that's double that, which is a $75.63 charge out rate. For those of you that think the 100% should apply to the original contracted hourly rate of $28, well, you're wrong, because if you look at any other business, let's say it's an import business that brings $2 products from China and it costs $2 to import, that's $4 per item. So a 100% margin on an item like that would put it at $8, not $4. And what we've done is the same here. The true hourly rate cost of Brian is $37, not $28. And if you want to make margin, you want to apply it to the true cost. Now currently you've got the charge out rate for Brian at $60, so there's a shortfall of $15.63. What you can see over here is another way of viewing it. And what we see immediately in here, we've got 1 and 2 people who are actually making us less money than what they cost us. And we can also see that probably over 40% of the people are on a very low gross margin for what they cost us. To compare the before and after scenario, so now I'll bring up my before company over here and my after company here, we can see the change in the graph lines. And we can see that apart from this one person here, we're making profit on everyone, and we've probably increased our gross profit by a reasonable amount per person on average. One thing I do want to indicate as well, that's occasionally if you see zero, see the zero figure there, that just means that Bridget's an admin and you're not making any money from her, but you could be inventive and start to charge her out for some of the customer services, and that would change that and overcome one of your admin costs. Right, moving on. If we look at the patchworks now, down here we have the theoretical maximum revenue. So this is in theory that if each of these individuals had 100% of their time at the maximum billable hourly rate, Max would make me 166,000 a year. Vince would make me 124,000 a year. We can compare this to the theoretical probable revenue. Now, probable revenue means that we've taken into account the amount of time people will actually be at work. So that's taking off entitlements, long service leave, maternity leave, whatever it is. So what we can do is just quickly see by comparing the patchworks who are our probable best earners. But one thing we still haven't taken into account is the cost of these individuals. All we're looking at there is if we manage to bill them out. But if we go, what could we bill you out for on the probable, and we took away what they cost us in salaries, wages and allowances, we start to see over here who our most profitable staff are. So our most profitable staff are, say, Basil and Dave. But if you look over here, Basil's in that list there. But if there is any big variance between these, then you need to be looking at, okay, what's my roles, my allocations, and am I overpaying any individuals for that particular role? Just as a side topic, I'm just going to go to the industry comparison report and show you how you compared roles. For those of you that have the option, you can compare roles to your average rate and the industry average rate as well, which also means you can compare things like your normal charge out rate. So you can see here this company has a usual charge out rate of $55 an hour, but the industry average is $58.46. I now want to move on to attributions. So two important things in attributions. Number one is you can see Carter here and the copy of Carter for the new company. And what we've effectively got is the same hourly rate or true hourly rate. Moving some staff on to being contractors, which will change this rate, and or if possible, see if you can negotiate a lower hourly rate so that you can build in some better margin. If staff can see the long-term viability of the company, they may be open to a reduction in salaries. If not, then move down here to the B widget and we'll just focus in on that. What you can see very quickly is the current charge out rate, which is the blue line, and the minimum hourly rate, which is the lowest truer cost of what those staff cost you. And by looking along the line, you can see the variance and where you're making most money out of which individuals. So it's a case of lowering the costs, which is the staff salaries, or increasing the charge out rates and or increasing your business efficiency. Okay, so that was a pretty good grounding on how to use Laborate to help you restructure a company. And when you've got to this point, then you can continue the process. So you might go through to company here, and you can see we've got our two companies, the original one and our copied one. And we could copy the copy again by going duplicate, or we can make another model off the original one here by going duplicate. Or if we've decided that we want to move staff in and out of this operation, then we can go to the staff section, and you'll see here that we've got Barry and Barry copy. So Barry will copy through to the original Barry. So see here Adrian has been removed, but if we want to copy Adrian again and put him back into that model, we just go here and we go duplicate. So there you have it, a very good modelling tool that helps you to look at the economic outcomes of doing a restructure. Don't forget that this can be used equally as well for growing a company and deciding on which roles should be fitted into the organisation to optimise growth. So where to next? Well, you have already looked at how you can lower your operational costs, and in Laborate you have looked at lowering your staff costs. To help you implement your economic plan, you will want to involve HR and, if you're a large company, your legal team. This is so that you avoid personal grievance cases after you have restructured your firm. Your payroll team should also form part of this group. After consulting with them, if you find that you need to change some of your staff selections, then do so in Laborate so that you can see the overall cost implications of these decisions. Remember, this is an optimization tool that will help you project likely outcomes. I would also advise you to revisit labour rate afterwards, say a month after the dust has settled. This will help you to maximise your profit. Finally, if you haven't already seen my video on the theory of restructuring, you may want to watch this as well. If you're not already a customer of labour rate, you should realise by now that labour rate is a highly valuable tool for regularly measuring your profitability. We advise our clients to run the figures at least every 3 months. Don't forget to recommend us to your accountants and your business friends. Thank you for watching. I'm Lester Bryant.